Good evening. My name is Dr. Greg Manfrey, the Director of Secondary Education for Upper Darby School District. And welcome to the Upper Darby School District Pandemic Reopening of Schools Forum. It is important to note at this time that this session is being recorded and will be made available to you following the forum. We're hoping you were able to view the video presentation, which outlines school reopening plans for elementary, middle, and high school students. Tonight, we will be discussing the 4 options discussed in the videos, which range from 2 in-person flexible options while implementing social distancing where possible, full virtual learning, and returning to in-person instruction as we were prior to COVID-19. We will also be addressing information we recently received regarding stronger considerations and guidance for opening schools completely. We will also discuss common themes from questions we received through committeequestions@upperdarbysd.org. Many of your questions will be answered throughout the presentation. However, you will also have the opportunity to ask any additional questions using the Zoom chat feature. These questions and any questions not addressed during the session will be included in our frequently asked questions, which will also be provided to you after this evening. It is our hope that at the end of this session, we will be able to come to a consensus on the reopening of our schools. You will be asked to take a brief survey to indicate your preferred school reopening option. A survey will be sent to your email address that you provided. We thank you in advance for your willingness to provide us feedback. To get us started, we will first hear a message from our superintendent, Dr. Dan McGarry.
Good evening, and thank you for your participation in this forum this evening. I wish that I could have provided this as an overview in person, but in this new virtual environment, we're all learning new ways to deliver information. The Upper Darby School District has attempted to design several options for the reopening of our schools. Unfortunately, the guidance for reopening schools in Pennsylvania has been limited up until this point, providing several different options and opinions on social distancing, appropriate personal protective equipment, and whether or not virtual instructional days will actually count toward the state-mandated 900 to 990 hours and the required 180 days of instruction. The county recently formed a reopening of school task force that consists of several Delaware County superintendents, the executive director of the Delaware County Intermediate Unit, and medical experts from the University of Pennsylvania and the Chester County Department of Health. As a member of this work group, we will be holding our second meeting on Monday, June 29th. I will provide more information following the countywide discussion regarding the reopening of schools. Prior to the formation of this work group, Pennsylvania school districts have been working on developing flexible instructional models in an attempt to figure out how to best meet the Pennsylvania Department of Education's, known as PDE, guidance, as well as recommendations from the CDC. As you can imagine, it is not an easy task to develop a plan with so many moving parts and ever-changing medical guidance. The information we are providing this evening and the plans and options for the reopening of our schools are imperfect, and we recognize that some of the options create obstacles for you and your family. I'd like to say that again. The information we are providing this evening and the plans and options for the reopening of our schools are imperfect, and we recognize that some of the options create obstacles for you and your family. We will do our best to make adjustments within reason to support you and your family through all of this. We recognize that our students are best served in our schools, by our staff, and provided with an opportunity to socialize with peers. We must, however, do this the safest way we can. Regardless of the option the Board of School Directors approves, we will do our best to provide a meaningful and engaging educational experience. Our options for implementing social distancing and attempting to meet Pennsylvania Department of Education and CDC guidelines required us to shift boundary lines for some communities at the elementary and middle school level because of a lack of space and a lack of personnel for some of our schools. We have designed options that provide for flexible instruction with social distancing to the maximum extent possible. We're also considering options for a return to full in-person instruction, asking parents and families to promote proper hygiene, hand washing, and keeping students home from school when sick. Essentially, we will need your help as a community no matter what option we pick. A final option is virtual instruction for students if a school or district is required to close. We are attempting to use grant funding to increase our student Chromebook devices to provide each student, kindergarten through 12th grade, with a device for the 2020-2021 school year. If we are to move to virtual instruction only, the academic program we provide would be substantially different than the academic program we provided during the mandated closure. This evening, our focus groups will provide a brief overview of the options for the session you are attending. Please note that each session will be recorded and provided on our district website. The facilitators for each session will bring back common themes for the Board of School Directors to consider before approving a final plan on July 14th. Thank you for your willingness to participate in this informational session this evening. And as a final reminder, I hope you know that we are doing our best to navigate all of this information and make the best decisions that we can. Not one plan is perfect at this time, but we are going to continue to work with you, our community members, and our students to provide the best educational experience that we can. Thank you for listening, and thank you for engaging with us this evening. This has been the Superintendent of Schools, Dan McGarry.
I'd like to thank Dr. McGarry for his message. Just want to review with you tonight's agenda. I will be reviewing with you the expectations for public participation in district meetings. I will be reviewing with you our overview of assumptions and goals. Dr. Alloway and Dr. Yerson will then be reviewing with you our flexible schedule and other options briefly. And we will begin to overview with you the common themes that were able to be pulled out of the questions that were emailed to us at our email address. We will consider the unanswered questions in the chat. We have a note taker who will be providing us that opportunity. And if we do not get to the questions, we will have an FAQ available for you after this evening's presentation. And finally, a survey will be sent directly to your email address that you provided, which will give you an opportunity to provide input into which direction you think the school board should go. We want to remind everyone at this time of our policy for public participation at meetings. In accord with Policy 903, the board, and by extension, district administration, recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving members of the public in meetings. District administration also recognizes its responsibility to conduct its business in an orderly and efficient manner that permits opportunity for orderly expression of public comment. To that end, we have provided, prior to this forum, an email address by which the public was able to submit comments and questions for consideration this evening. Answers to these questions will also be provided through a frequently asked questions document. A video recording of this session will be available for your review as well. We will be emailing the video and the FAQ to families and posting these to our website, to YouTube, with the closed captioning feature, and across our social media in the days following tonight's forum. In order to permit further comment during tonight's forum, participants will be able to use the Zoom chat feature to ask a question. The facilitator will attempt to address these questions throughout the presentation. It is important that you adhere to the following guidelines and rules of decorum when using the chat feature. Number one, please post your first and last name each time you enter a comment or a question. Number two, please frame your comment or question clearly and as briefly as possible. Number three, refrain from entering irrelevant or personally directed comments. And number four, please do not use abusive or obscene language. All of such comments will be deleted and the commentator will exclude you from the meeting. We thank you in advance for your cooperation and adherence to these guidelines. At this time, I will begin sharing my screen. First, I'd like to review with you what the objectives of this evening's forum are. Please understand that Upper Darby School District takes the student and staff safety as being our paramount responsibility. As a result, we've decided to separate the students at each school, both Beverly Hills Middle School and Drexel Hill Middle School, into 4 cohorts in an effort to follow CDC guidelines for in-school social distancing to the greatest extent possible, which is a minimum of 5 to 6 feet or 25 to 36 square feet, and provide daily deep cleaning of all of our schools and buses. We would like to maximize and create equitable in-person instruction opportunities for all of our students, grades 6 through 8. Some of the assumptions. First, let's talk about the daily schedule. In option 1 that you'll be seeing, the daily schedule for Beverly Hills Middle School will have 2 cohorts, a morning cohort and an afternoon cohort. The morning cohort will be from 8 a.m. to 11:25 a.m., and the afternoon cohort will be from 12:05 p.m. to 2:40 p.m. Again, option 1 for Drexel Hill Middle School, the a.m. cohort will be from 8:30 a.m. to 11:55 a.m., and the p.m. cohort will be from 12:35 p.m. to 3:10 p.m. You will also see a second option, which is another flexible schedule option, where Beverly Hills Middle School AM cohort would come in at 8 a.m. and leave at 10:54 a.m., and the PM cohort would come in at 11:46 and leave at 2:40 p.m. In option 2, Drexel Hill Middle School's AM cohort would come in at 8:30 and leave at 11:24, and the PM cohort would come in at 12:16 and leave at 3:10 p.m. Please understand that students will be divided into 4 cohorts, which essentially means that these cohorts would be going to in-person, face-to-face school approximately twice a week. Beverly Hills Middle School will have approximately 290 students in their cohort. 450 of the students at Beverly Hills Middle School will be redistributed to Drexel Hill Middle School. Drexel Hill Middle School's classrooms by square foot are bigger than Beverly Hills Middle School's classrooms. Drexel Hill Middle School will have approximately 465 students in their cohort. The average class size will be between 5 and 10 students, providing 200 to 250 square feet for teachers, 25 to 36 square feet for social distancing for students, and all of those measurements account for classroom furniture and walking space. Time during the school week when students are not physically in school will be asynchronous distance learning. What do I mean by asynchronous? Asynchronous means that students will be working on assignments and lessons provided to them by their teachers, and teachers will be commenting to their students back virtually through our learning management system, Schoology. Face-to-face instruction will be basically 17% of the time that we were able to provide your children prior to the pandemic. Special programs like the Autistic Support and Life Skills Program will be meeting every day, all day, for 4 days a week, and will be virtual on Wednesdays. By the way, all students will be virtual on Wednesdays, providing teachers with an opportunity for prep, professional development, and office hours for our families and students who need to connect with their teachers. Another assumption is that we will be providing our students a grab-and-go breakfast and lunch daily for all students. The cafeteria will not be utilized for lunch. Our busing will be providing students within the board-approved mileage radius, which for middle school is 2 miles, or hazardous routes. Students will be required to wear masks on our buses, but we will not be able to enforce students wearing masks in school. We can do the best possible job we can in the flexible schedule options, but if we go to full brick and mortar, it will be virtually impossible to enforce mask wearing with our students. Our teachers will be required to wear masks. I believe Dr. Alloway or Dr. Yerson at this time, you can take over the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Manfrey. My name is Brian Yerson. I'm the principal at Beverly Hills Middle School. Dr. Manfrey, if you can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to speak to you briefly about option 1, a quick overview. Dr. Alloway will review briefly the next 3 options. Option 1, as Dr. Manfrey said, is 4 cohorts of students rotating in. Each cohort would have 2 face-to-face meetings each week. In their AM session, they would go to 4 classes. In their PM session, they would attend their other 3 classes. Currently, in a normal traditional school day, our students have 7 academic courses. That would hold true in option 1. In this option also, our students would need to transition from class to class in the halls. Dr. Alloway.
Thank you, Dr. Yerson. Dr. Manfrey, if you'll just bring that slide back to the previous one, thank you. In option 2, we stick with 4 cohorts. This is another option that allows students 2 face-to-face meetings per day. The difference, the primary difference between option 2 and option 1 is that in option 2, we have a 6-period day instead of a 7-period day. What does that mean? It means that we are merging the elective class and intervention class into a class that we'll call the learning community. That will be where students get instruction based off of where their needs are during that 6th period. The benefit of taking away 1 class stretches the other 4 core classes and the wheel elective class across the day, and allows us to schedule our buildings in a way that teams of 6 teachers will rotate among 5 classrooms so that students do not have to transition in the hallway in option 2. The balance of the daily schedule on both sides, AM and PM, is the exact same, so we have the same number of instructional minutes predictably on both sides of the day. Option 3, of course, fingers crossed we don't have to get into this, but option 3 is a full distance learning program. It will be different than the distance learning program that we operated when we were cast into this in the spring of this year. The major difference being that teachers have had the opportunity in professional development and to work together to build robust and rigorous courses online, and we'll go into the fall with more guidelines, more guidance on time spent in synchronous instruction and time spent in asynchronous instruction. And then option 4, again, fingers crossed that the health of our community is at the forefront of our attention, but option 4 would be a complete and total return to a traditional schedule, following all of the CDC recommendations for social distancing as best as possible when you bring all students back into their traditional schedule. And if Dr. Manfield tab to the next slide. The next slide just shows for parents, I think it's easiest to visually understand this. This is what your child's schedule would look like, and we modeled this on option number 1. So as a student, my Monday, I know that I'm going to attend Beverly Hills Middle School at 8 o'clock in the morning. I have my first 4 periods. On Tuesday, I'm going to keep up with my online courses. On Wednesday, I'll do the same thing. And I also made a note to myself that I have a 3 p.m. Google Hangout with my student government that day. On Thursday, my schedule shows me in the PM for my 5th, 6th, and 7th period. On Friday, I'm going to continue to take advantage of the time to keep up with my Schoology courses. And then I go into the weekend and it's dinner at my mom's house on Sunday night. And Dr. Manfred, if you'll tab to the next one. I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Dr. Yerson. He and I will go alternating on the themes from the community questions. We took the time to go through each of the questions that came from the community, identify the way that they come up thematically, and hopefully the presentation, we answer each of the questions that are in there. And again, if not, please place those into the chat feature. Dr. Yerson.
Thank you, Dr. Alloway. One of the questions that we got was concerning masks. We will follow the guidelines that have come out from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. They are that all students will be required to wear masks during district-provided transportation to and from school. Per the guidelines that have been set forth, 2 students will occupy each bus seat while on district-provided transportation. Staff and students will be encouraged to wear masks during the school day, especially when moving around the building or in close contact with others. Students and staff may bring a personal face mask, and the school will maintain a supply of face masks for students and staff. Schools will undergo a deep cleaning every day. Teachers will be disinfecting desks during class transitions if option 1 is selected. Teachers will be disinfecting their rooms as much as possible during the middle of the day during that transition time between each cohort. Hand sanitizer will be available for all staff and students. We ask that parents keep children home if they are sick, symptomatic, or running a fever. In the flexible models, each student will have their temperature checked before entering a district bus or before entering the school building. Hand washing and hygiene will be a focal point of instruction for all students in the opening weeks of the school year. Visual reminders and signs will reinforce proper hand washing and hygiene throughout the buildings. Subsequent reminders will be planned throughout the school year. Maintenance and facilities personnel will be cleaning common areas such as the lobby, bathrooms, and handrails throughout the day. Now over to Dr. Alloway for our next bullet point.
The next theme in here after personal protective was about Wednesdays and distance learning. And the 2 major areas of questions were really about what are students going to do on this distance learning day on Wednesday, and what will the teachers be doing on distance learning Wednesdays? So I'll start with the students. They're our most important. With the flipped classroom approach, students will have the time to review and independently access learning material via the videos, selected reading passages, literature, and other online resources, answering questions, generating questions to bring back to their teachers. Students will also have the opportunity that day to work with teachers during scheduled office hours on Wednesdays, and students can also engage and interact with teachers and families as well in conferences for where things are confusing that haven't been able to be clarified during the in-class experiences. Teachers on Wednesday, obviously, I mentioned that they'll have a block of time that they'll use for communication with their students and with their classes. The next part of their day will have a block of time for preparation. Teachers are going to need additional preparation in this model because you're not only, as a teacher, prepping for an in-class experience for all of your students, but you're also prepping for online experiences for your students when they're learning away from the school. Teachers will be able to communicate with their students during the communication block. They will be able to run, if needed, synchronous lessons on those days with their entire class during that communication period. They will also have time for professional development, communicating with families, developing, again, lesson plans, and having a day for flexible learning allows for a little bit more personal interactions between the teachers and their virtual learners. So in addition to the communication block, the flexible day gives teachers the opportunity to better prepare and meet with children and their families as needed again. Dr. Usone, boundaries.
Thank you, Dr. Alloway. We received some questions with parents and students discussing, why do students need to go to Drexel Hill who are typically slated? Why would they need to go to Drexel Hill who are typically slated to go to Beverly Hills? And the reason for that is the classroom size within Drexel Hill as compared to Beverly Hills Middle School. So Drexel Hill has larger classes in terms of square feet. And when we went through the calculations of giving students between 25 and 36 square feet per student, along with the teachers' required square footage, the furniture, the walkways within classrooms, Drexel Hill is able to account for and hold more students while adhering to the CDC guidelines. And in doing so, we would be moving about 450 students from Beverly Hills to Drexel Hill. And this would be all of our Highland Park students. This gives all the students, middle school students in the district, an equal opportunity to receive the same education in face-to-face instruction as each other. And this would only happen if options 1 or 2 were selected. There was also concern and questions about the transportation for this change. All transportation will follow the guidelines as outlined in District Policy 810. So we would follow through with those. If students live more than 1.5 miles away from the middle school, they would be qualified. They would qualify for busing. Dr. Alloway?
Just to add, Dr. Usone, if there is a hazardous route defined by the state of Pennsylvania, then those students would also qualify for transportation.
Correct. Thank you, Dr. Manfrey. Dr. Alloway?
Thank you. The next bullet point from the themes talks about academic achievement and growth. I will say, first, I'll share with you what I shared with the teachers at Drexel Hill Middle School, which is knowing that no student comes equally prepared for school on the first day of school. We've become experts at identifying students where they are, where they need to be challenged, and where they need to be supported to make it to what it's expected for standards for each grade level. So recognizing that we're coming off of a pretty disrupted spring, we're going to have plans in place to capture a baseline for all of our students and to identify the strategies and the lessons that they need to catch up. So our teachers understand that there are gaps that they'll need to fill. I believe that the teachers are able to cover most of the material lost during the pandemic during the beginning of the school year. And in addition, the flipped classroom model gives students additional opportunities to learn concepts from home and then have those concepts reinforced during their face-to-face sessions. There were a lot of questions about if families are uncomfortable sending their child to school, really regardless of the options that are selected. One of the things we want to talk about is that students could have the opportunity to stay home and participate through distance learning platform. And then it would be essential that they work with their teachers during the face-to-face or during the communication block on Wednesdays, just to make sure that they have the opportunity to communicate and to ask questions of their teachers or to have content or concepts clarified to them. There were questions about academic achievement and growth, about grading policies. And really the decision about the grading policy or the grading practices is going to be the next step that we'll have to take after this public forum. And when the public has the opportunity to weigh in on the options, and the board then decides how we're going to move things forward. There is the possibility that we'll go back to the traditional grading system, but we don't know that just yet. Dr. Yerson?
The next theme that we came across was parents and students' concerns about, what's happening with clubs, activities, sports, if we are virtual and not back in the building full time. Clubs and activities that can run virtually can remain in operation using the distance tools such as Zoom, as we're in now, or Google Hangout. We would work to, if one of the flexible options is chosen, to have instrumental music lessons that could occur during our learning community periods or as scheduled by the instrumental music teacher. And we would work with the PIAA and work to follow their guidelines for sports programming and recommendations. Dr. Alloway.
A lot of thematic questions came about scheduling. And so we went through really what the proposals for options 1 and 2 are here in scheduling cohorts. First and foremost, just like if you appear in school on day 1 and you look and you say, I just don't like anybody in my classroom, we really don't have a plan to right now accept any kind of hand scheduling of cohorts based off of those preferences. That being said, there were questions about how we're scheduling families, and can a family be guaranteed a schedule that aligns elementary, middle, and high school? And the answer right now is under the models, they're different, right? The elementary model proposal for a flexible learning environment has a different length of the day, duration of days within the week, and the high school equally is in the same kind of a position where no one model is going to line up for children of the exact same family. So we can't really guarantee that the siblings through the district will be in the buildings at the exact same time on the exact same days all the way through the week. The way that we created our models was to provide balance, to be able to get as many children as would be safely possible into the building at a time. We had to choose that based off of the number of middle school aged children that lived inside of those boundaries in the neighborhood planning units, also with attention paid to making sure that children of different elementary schools had the opportunity to come to middle school together, that we didn't have any kind of an imbalance with any of the feeder pattern elementary schools, that everybody felt that the middle school community was one together. We looked at making sure that there was a balance for students with special needs and also with students who are English language learners. So again, that they were not disproportionately arriving to school on the same day, and not being able to get the services that they can inside of the classrooms that are split into 4. So that is really the answer on how we're going to go about scheduling and with families. So next up on the themes are the questions related to when things go back to normal.
Thank you. So we had, a handful of questions about, what happens if we go back, or, there's a vaccine or something like that. So if the district opens in a flexible option, flexible learning environment. The plan will be that we stay in that environment for the entirety of the 2021 school year. And then after that, the following year, post-COVID-19, students would return to their original assigned middle school. Pretty much the Highland Park students would come back to Beverly Hills in subsequent years. And our last theme was special education supports.
And I just want to, start off by saying, as a parent, and taking my principal hat off for a moment, special education is a question that is much deeper than any single evening forum or event. And so always the resources of the school, the IEP team, we're a part of your family and your child's life when they're coming to school. So if this answer is not comprehensive to every single question that comes up, just know that we're here all summer, and we're always willing to work with you and to answer questions, because I don't want families to not have a question answered with respect to special education and what you expect for your children and their growth. For students who receive learning support services, learning support will be assigned to students who receive those services will be assigned to a cohort, and they will receive face-to-face instruction as well as face-to-face special education services, either during the learning community in the second model, or during the intervention periods in model number 1. For students who receive emotional support services, those students again will be assigned to a cohort, and the model has inclusion in the general education setting that's also balanced with direct and explicit instruction in areas where children have IEP goals and accommodations that need to be made. For students who receive a supplemental level of autistic support, and same with our life skills support students, at Drexel Hill Middle School, we have a 4-day, full-day model in place that will allow us to provide direct instruction in person for each student in the supplemental life skills or autistic support programs. This model also has inclusion in the general education setting to the greatest degree possible. We're just over 40% inclusion in the general education setting. And that is balanced, again, with direct and explicit instruction in the areas where children have IEP goals and needs. Related services, the provision of those related services will happen during the student's time in the building, and then also, as is possible, in a virtual setting. So case managers will continue to support your children with the special needs that have related services in an IEP. In option 1, for example, with the 7 periods of instruction, all students maintain their full course schedule. And so they'll be able to receive those supports in a way similar to the way that they would have when they were in the building. In option 2, the learning community period is in the student's schedule. And as I mentioned earlier, that's the time when the students are able to get what they need as far as replacement instruction for an intervention for reading, math, or other IEP goal areas where they will be taught and monitored during those sessions. The interventions in a traditional schedule, which is option 1, and the learning community period in option 2, again, will align to support or supplement courses in Schoology where students receive additional instruction. So what that means then would be, if you had an intervention period for math, you'd have that face-to-face time 1 time per week, but that course itself in your schedule will still have a supplement course in Schoology that you'll receive instructional videos, directions, accommodated materials, and support that you can access during your at-home flipped learning model class time. And then there were a lot of questions about when we would resume in-person evaluation and reevaluation practices. The in-person instruction will resume when we resume in-building experiences for our students. And obviously, depending on current recommendations for social distancing, we go back to the personal protective equipment question from earlier, psychologists doing reevaluations and initial evaluations with students. We'll do an evaluation as best as possible using personal protective equipment such as face shields and or acrylic dividers on the desks or tables that they're working with students. And that takes us to the end of the common themes. So that's a lot in a little bit of time. We're going to go back to Dr. Manfrey, who will discuss the conclusion of the open forum, and then we'll get into those questions.
Well, actually, we're going to try and get into the questions first, Dr. Alloway, and I want to give as much time to the questions that have been placed in the chat as I possibly can. I want to remind everyone who is at the forum or logged into the forum that there is a chance that either A, we don't get to your question because we only have until 7:30, or B, we don't have the answer to the question, and we're going to get the answer to your question and include it in our frequently asked questions document over the next several days. I'll try to take these questions in order as best I can, and when I need help, I'll certainly ask Dr. Alloway and Dr. Yerson to jump in. The first question is, will this be a majority vote, or will medical and public health experts make the final decision on which approach we take as a community? So first of all, Dr. McGarry, our superintendent, has been participating in numerous meetings with both health officials and other superintendents from within our own county, Montgomery County, Chester County, and Bucks County. And I can tell you that having listened to some of those meetings and having listened to the report from Dr. McGarry on how some of those meetings are going, we're having a difficult time right now coming to a consensus, even within the medical profession, as to how school districts should proceed. Frankly, we've been given very little guidance, even from the state of Pennsylvania, the Department of Education. So we are taking into consideration our health experts, our medical doctors that we have had the opportunity to consult with. The decision on how we're going to move forward is really going to be in the hands of the board, with recommendations being made by the administration. The board meeting where this decision will be made will be July 14th, 2020. I can tell you that this administration feels very strongly, that in order to protect our students and our staff, we should be strongly encouraging our board and our public to consider one of the two flexible scheduling options. We really believe that that is the best course of action at this time. Next question. How many students will the average teacher have on their roster? That is, how many grade 8 English language arts students would a teacher have responsibility for in total? For example, would that be the same ratio at each school? Thinking about access and utilization of office hours. That's a great question. Beverly Hills Middle School's teachers will certainly have some more students that they will be responsible for. Drexel Hill Middle School teachers will certainly have some more students that they will be responsible for than Beverly Hills Middle School. And we grappled with that decision, but at the end of the day, in order for us to create a situation where we're abiding by CDC guidelines and maintaining socially distancing, it really was the only option we had. As far as the number of students that teachers will be responsible for, I'll allow Dr. Alloway and Dr. Yerson to jump in on that one.
So each cohort at Drexel Hill Middle School will see a maximum of 8 students. That's based off of the numbers that we have right now, and that is a quarter of the class. So a classroom size would be at about 32 students per class, and teachers would have 5 classes per day in their schedule.
And at Beverly Hills, we would be around 5 students per class per cohort, with we'd be around 20 students per class.
Will siblings be placed in the same cohorts? I can tell you that it is nearly, in talking to our PIMS coordinator and demographer, Mr. Lambert, as well as transportation, it is really going to be nearly impossible for us district-wide to schedule siblings within similar cohorts. First of all, at the elementary level, we're talking about 2 cohorts, and at the middle school level, we're talking about, at the high school level, we're talking about 3 cohorts. However, I do believe we will try to accommodate to the best of our ability siblings who attend the same schools to the best of our ability. Please explain why students will not be required to wear masks during face-to-face instruction. We are asking, and we are asking very forcefully that students wear masks. We believe that we are, one of the reasons why we're leaning towards the flexible instruction model is that we believe that we will be able to enforce students wearing masks in that model in a much better way than we would if we come back full brick and mortar. So we are going to attempt the best we can to enforce the mask wearing. We are asking our students to wear masks. We are forcing our teachers to wear masks. But at the end of the day, if we come back full brick and mortar, which is a very distinct possibility, it's going to be difficult to enforce mask wearing beyond the bus, but we will do the best that we possibly can. Will families be able to opt out of option 1 or 2 and have their student be fully distance learning? Mrs. Riccioni, who is our Cyber Academy principal, is investigating ways where we could increase, for example, the licenses that we have through our Pearson product to enable us to do that. We're also investigating a product that the Delaware County Intermediate Unit provides students. And we're trying to find a way, because we do anticipate that regardless of the option we select, there are going to be students and families who opt to go full virtual. And we certainly want to make sure that we have that option available for our families. So yes, we are trying to find a way to find that option for our families. If the middle school students get 1 full total day per week in the classroom, is there a reason why we wouldn't just make it the same day the student has the morning and afternoon session? So I believe, if I'm understanding the question correctly, the reason is the limited number of students that we can allow in the school while maintaining CDC guidelines and social distancing. The rotation plan that we have in place allows us to maintain the 6 feet of social distancing required by CDC, the 5 to 6 feet of social distancing required by CDC. And in the model that you're suggesting, it appears, at least, unless I'm misunderstanding the question, and if I am, I hope to answer it more in a better way in the FAQ, it seems that there would be more students in those cohorts. Matt and Brian, do you want to weigh in on the question?
I think that one of the conflicts in that, because it sounds like it would make sense mathematically to utilize 4 days for 4 cohorts and then just let one, cohort number 1, for example, take the entire day Monday. But what that does is that puts us in a position where we have to add the lunch period back into the school day. And with the current guidelines and the distressing things that we've read about making sure that all students are facing in the same direction, they can't eat in meals in school facing each other, based off of the health and safety guidelines, reopening the cafeteria during the school day was not something that we saw as being very plausible.
Oh, I understand now. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Will the online coursework be limited to a certain amount of time per week? Some children were overloaded and stressed at times. I believe, in answering this question, I believe the flexible schedule provides us with an opportunity to do that, to do just that. I believe that our teachers were extremely ambitious in wanting to cover as much material as they possibly could in the asynchronous environment that they were in. Asynchronous meaning, as I defined earlier, having students work independently and have teachers commenting on that work in either a chat room or by email. I think by having this model, teachers will feel much more comfortable providing that asynchronous work and then reinforcing it when the students get into the face-to-face session. So this was actually a common theme that we heard throughout the time that we were from March 13th to May 29th. And yes, we will do the best we can to ensure that our children are not overwhelmed. And this also is part of why we think it's important to provide teachers with the opportunity and students with the opportunity to connect with their teachers during those Wednesday office hours. Brian and Matt, would you like to weigh in on that?
I think you're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Will Schoology coursework directly correlate with the content covered in the live classroom, or will it be separate material? No, the Schoology coursework, the asynchronous coursework, will be directly correlated to the coursework that's going on in the face-to-face sessions. Will option 2 mean teachers switch but stay in one place? Yes, the answer is yes. And a follow-up question to that from a different person, which is a very good point. Are students going to be left alone while teachers are transitioning from one classroom to the other? I would simply say that we are bringing back basically the team approach in some of these options. And those teachers will be within a very small area of the school building and will literally be perhaps across the hall or the classroom next door. And the students will only be alone for seconds. So Matt and Brian, would you like to weigh in on that?
Really, I don't even see seconds in that. I'm going to take a page out of the playbook of when I was a lifeguard at Aronimink. One person comes off a break and goes to the first stand, and then that taps that person out to go to the next stand. So in the teams in this model where the students stay in the same educational space, we're really trying to limit the spread of any kind of germs. And there will be 6 teachers sharing 5 classrooms. So the first person comes off of prep and really tags that next person. That next person goes to the next room. The students maintain, but the teachers transition.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for that, Matt. Will the autistic support students be self-contained in their classroom or wing? The program at Drexel Hill Middle School will have our special program students attending general education sessions very much the same way that they have done in the past. Matt, correct?
Yeah, and this we went over in a meeting with Mr. Marshallak, and Dr. Manfrey attended this meeting as well, where we discussed the best way to optimize students in the class. They will continue to be included in their general education setting, and then we already we specifically individualize the instruction for math and for reading supports and reading skills classes anyway. So there will be transition. They will not be fixed to one classroom all day long, though, as little as possible, trying to move people around from place to place. The size of a typical autistic support classroom, as far as the number of students assigned to that classroom, really makes that program conducive in a distance model, because the square footage inside of the classroom and the total enrollment of a class allows for 8 students in a classroom that can hold up to 14, for example, based off of distancing guidelines.
Thank you, Dr. Alloway. In option 4, if option 4 is able to be implemented, and I will tell you that there's a lot of school districts, and by option 4, I'm assuming you mean back full brick and mortar. There's a lot of school districts leaning towards option 4. If option 4 is to be implemented, would the students be returning for full 5 days a week? And the answer is yes. We would come back for a full 5 days a week, just like we were pre-pandemic, with, of course, cleaning, sanitizing of the buildings every night, wearing masks, etc. In addition to time, district provides cleaning supplies and hand sanitizers. Just to summarize this question, that the parent is asking if parents are going to be responsible for supplying cleaning supplies and hand sanitizers, tissues, wipes, etc. at the beginning of the school year. Through our CARES money, which was the CARES Act, through the money that we're getting from the federal government, we in our maintenance department have been purchasing hand sanitizers, cleaning supplies for our teachers in between sessions if we go to the cohort model. We're purchasing tissues, I believe, wipes. So to the extent possible, we are not asking, that doesn't even make sense, but we are not asking parents to provide cleaning supplies. How many additional teachers will the district provide Drexel Hill Middle School for the extra 465 students? That's a great question. We will be moving 4 Beverly Hills Middle School teachers from Beverly Hills Middle School to Drexel Hill Middle School to accommodate for that. But while that doesn't sound like a lot of teachers to cover the amount of students, we've been able to determine through the teaming process that it is actually the exact amount that we would need. Dr. Alloway, would you like to elaborate on that?
No, I think that that's the best way to say it. I selfishly first thought I could go for 20 teachers for 465 students, but the challenge to that would be I don't need that, and I don't have enough classrooms to give to those 20 additional teachers. So the way that we've been able to balance the classrooms, each grade level has essentially 20 educational environments for 60 spaces across the school, with the additional 6th person on each team. So we were able to round it out, and the 4 additional teachers from Beverly Hills Middle School is going to give us the opportunity to run those teams and to have a couple of teachers that support our world language department so that they can interact more directly with their students who are taking those electives.
Right. I believe also Dr. Alloway and Dr. Yasone, an ELL teacher.
Yes.
Okay. Great question coming up here. Are there enough buses, and how many kids on a bus? We are following PD's guidelines on this, and I believe we have enough buses, and we are going to be asking for 2 students per seat on a bus versus 3 students per seat on a bus.
And
Was
Dr.
there,
and
Dr.
also
Sorry.
the requirement of wearing the face mask on the buses.
Thank you. Yes, students will not be permitted on the bus without a mask. Was there a reason for getting rid of the office hours day the first week of school? That seems like a great week to have midweek check-in opportunity, etc. I believe that we're using that first Wednesday for professional development. Mrs. Kelly, is that correct?
Yes, it is, Dr. Manfrey.
So we felt like it was important for us to have the opportunity. I understand where you're coming from with this question. It would certainly seem to be a great opportunity for that. I would like to remind you, though, that even though that first Wednesday won't be available to your children for office hours with teachers, they will still have the opportunity to interact with their teachers on the off times that they're not face-to-face during that week. So they will still have opportunities to do that. I'm just doing a time check here. We're at 7:29. I don't think we're going to be able to get to the rest of the questions, but we do have them, and we will for sure put them in our frequently asked questions document that we will put out to the public. I am sorry that we couldn't get to all the questions. All of the questions are excellent questions. We're certainly working through this as best we can together with you. The reason why we did this forum, going back to one of the earlier questions, is that we really feel it's important to get a pulse for our community and where our community feels like we need to go. So I'm just going to read some closing remarks to you. And again, we promise that we will address each and every one of these questions in the chat through an FAQ. And remember that there will be a survey being emailed to you directly for another opportunity for you to provide us with input. Again, thank you for taking the time to participate in our Pandemic Reopening Schools Forum. We have appreciated your engagement and active participation throughout the school closure and remote learning over the past few months. We also appreciate your willingness to engage with us in this very complicated discussion and your commitment to work with us to try to find the best solution for your children and families as we navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, this situation is very fluid and changes can happen at any time. In fact, changes happen daily, sometimes hourly. The district is hopeful that with having all 4 options explored with our community, we will be in a better position to adjust to any guidance we might receive from the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the Center for Disease Control. At the conclusion of this session, you again will be receiving an email with a link to the survey. Please complete that survey. As a reminder, please feel free to email any questions about the pandemic reopening of schools plan to committee questions, spelled out COMMITTEEQUESTIONS at upperdarbysd.org. That's committee questions at upperdarbysd.org. You can also visit our website at www.upperdarbysd.org for information about our plans. Once again, I thank you for your time this evening. Please know that we recognize that none of these plans are the most ideal plan, and we will continue to work to come up with the best possible solution to these issues as we possibly can. Thank you, and have a great evening.